Let me go ahead and tell you something that you may not be aware of. The black media is nowhere near as powerful as the white media, and yet the black media has managed, with its comparatively meager influence, to be able to stymie and stonewall the efforts of the white media to shove the same old, predictable, failed pattern of electoral misbehavior down the black community's throats. We have decided to throw a wrench into the gears. And while the machine hasn't come to a crashing halt, it's making a hell of a lot of noise and it's become a hell of a lot less effective. And so the white media and white power, which is what backs the white media's response, has been to amplify their efforts. And that means they're trying to counter-program by bringing out a whole bunch of black front flunkies. People who are actually on the payroll of white supremacy, but pretending as if they speak for you and me. White supremacy used the money that it gained from our slave labor in order to create entire armies of flunkies who do nothing but sow confusion and disorder in our community. They don't just have one or two fools on the payroll, they've got entire groups of them under their sway. Now, if you want to know whether you're dealing with a white supremacist front Negro, all you have to do is follow the money. As we get closer and closer to the 2020 primaries for the Democrats, which is where it's really going to show that the black vote is listening to the black media and has completely tuned out the white media's front flunkies, they're going to start bringing in a whole bunch of Negroes, putting a whole bunch of black folks on TV for the sake of saying, oh, this is who you should be listening to. They're going to be banging that drum hard as hell. I already told you about how CNN's going to have their 4 fools on this fall. And already you've had Puff Daddy's Revolt TV fiasco. And there's more coming. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more coming. But you're going to be having 2 groups in particular who I predict are going to be getting a hell of a lot more airplay, and we're going to go ahead and expose them now. I already exposed the phony baloney BlackPAC some months back, but what we're going to do is we're going to start hammering this one. I'm going to dedicate this video to exposing not 1 but 2 phony baloney so-called black organizations who are actually nothing more than sock puppets for their white paymasters. White power believes in having people within the groups that they intend to oppress working for them. This has been a classic strategy of white supremacy. Co-opt some of the very people who you're going to be putting into chains. And if you want to know whether you're dealing with a real black grassroots organization or some white power funded front group, you gotta follow the money. Now, the first group we're going to start with is one that was getting a little bit of attention, especially earlier this year, right after Kamala Harris announced her candidacy, because they were one of the main groups calling themselves pimping for her. I'm talking, of course, about SheThePeople. This group was started by a black woman, Amy Allison, but all these guys do is promote white supremacy's divide and conquer strategy among black people, trying to tell black women that they have to fall on their swords for the Democrats, and the most important thing that black women can do is show that their vote matters. Yeah, while you're busy fighting to see if you can vote for white supremacist candidate A or white supremacist candidate B. They claim that they're all about empowering women of color, but their message is so watered down, it's so bland, it's so indistinct that it might as well have come from white conservatives. Now, if you want to know what a con game SheThePeople's running, all you got to do is go to their website. They make sure to use the phrase women of color all over the place to an obscene degree. They say it so much that they almost don't have room to say anything else. That's the main thing that they talk about. Women of color, women of color. Organization was started by a black woman, but spends most of her time talking about women of color. What does that tell you? What that tells you is she's got a for sale sign on her empty forehead. Amy Allison is clearly looking for some sort of white paycheck. She's looking for some white organization, some white political party, some white network to give her something permanent, and that's what she's trying to do. I guess she must have taken her cues from BlackPAC, because SheThePeople only got started last year, I believe. And yet she's running around talking the exact same indistinct, anybody but black words that you know are dog whistle language to white donors and to white paymasters. There's absolutely no mention of a black agenda or a black anything from Amy Allison and She the People. All the copy on their website makes it excruciatingly clear that they're just your run-of-the-mill, typical left-wing consulting group. She the People's not pushing a black agenda. They're simply there to prove that they can corral and manipulate black voters, and you need to give them money. That's the main thing that they're selling. See how effective we are at tapping into the black zeitgeist. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to burnish their laurels that apparently they've got the pulse of the black community, though they're very careful. By the way, just in case you're thinking that we're trying to act, that we're going to be pushing you to do anything for black people, we're not. Just put us on the payroll, please. Okay, so She the People's duplicitous rhetoric is easy enough to spot, but what about the money connections? Who's propping these scumbags up? She the People seems to be nothing more than an auxiliary for the white left-wing media's favorite Daily Kos website. Literally all of She the People's Twitter posts tags Daily Kos, and they seem to be thick as thieves. They had a so-called presidential forum back in April, which was moderated by, wait for it, Joy Reid. And, as you would expect, it was a predictably pointless affair where the candidates were allowed to give the same old stump speech and no one challenged them or demanded anything of them. It was basically a joint press conference. There was absolutely no policy discussion. It was just the same old, well, you need one of us in there because of that mean old Trump. It was clearly a naked attempt to try to psychologically masturbate black women and try to hoodwink the black vote in general. And on the one hand, we're going to pat you dumb Negro females on the head because we're sure that you'll fall for it because it's white people doing it. And on the other hand, they were saying we have to beat Trump no matter what. Even if you're not going to get anything, even if there's nothing in it for you, well, helping make sure that we get something. Beating Trump, that's much more important. That's the optics that She the People was trying to manufacture. Let's show the nation a whole bunch of black folks, especially black women, applauding these do-nothing candidates who have not promised black people anything, who have instead been abusive and dismissive of black people's real interests and real needs. And we're going to show you all these black women applauding them, and hopefully what's going to happen is this is going to give a groundswell of support for the Democrats. We're going to see if we can hopefully hoodwink at least 50% of black people. If we can just get every black woman out there who's eligible to vote to roll out to the polls, hopefully that's going to nullify this black voter disengagement campaign that the New Voices of Black Media have been pushing. Don't bother demanding anything. Don't ask any tough questions of the candidates or their policies. You damn sure shouldn't be showing up saying what's in it for black folks. You need to be focusing on people of color. Yeah, because all these other groups have been focusing on black people, don't you know? You just need to focus on being scared of Trump. That and how great it is to see Kamala Harris preening for the cameras like a peacock. Speaking of pathetic preening, Amy Allison wrote a piece for the Daily Kos, not surprisingly, back in June, entitled Women of Color, Not Pundits, Will Determine Democratic Frontrunner. Women of Color. Never mind the fact that Asians and Hispanics break for Republicans, because both of these groups see class, not race, as being their biggest problem, and they also see black people as somehow being an obstacle to what they want. As they see it, they're closer to being part of the white mainstream, so it's crazy to act as if Asians and Hispanics are going to determine the Democratic frontrunner. It has been made abundantly clear by both of these groups that their interests are not ours, and to hear certain of these organizations tell it, our interests are diametrically opposed to theirs. This is why you don't see Hispanic or Asian groups talking that people of color guff. You never see them trying to claim that black people's interests ought to be allied with theirs so they can have a larger voting bloc. Black people are the base of the Democratic Party. What possible sense does it make to deprioritize black people and to instead prioritize other groups who have made it clear that they're holding out for the GOP? But that's what this silly Amy Allison woman is doing. So what she's doing is no different than what happened in the 60s with the whole thing about minorities. A phrase so vague that it could mean anything, and it did come to mean anything because 50% of the white population, white women, are considered minorities, which means 50% of white folks are entitled to whatever affirmative action or whatever sort of social justice programs that they're supposed to be out there. White people, 50% of white folks can go ahead and say, I'm laying claim to that too. And 2 out of 3 white women voted for Donald Trump. So when you decide that you're going to play this women of color stuff, which is nothing more than a pathetically thinly veiled attempt to try to figure out how we can have as many different, read non-black women as possible under the same roof, that goes nowhere, which of course is the entire point. Now, in Amy Allison's little puff piece on the Daily Kos, she declared that, quote, the core winning Democratic base will be made up primarily of women. Notice how she put women first. Women, people of color, and young folks. So we went from a headline that touted women of color to an article that blatantly separates women of color and women in general. And she made sure, this is something that Amy Allison wrote. She made sure that people of color came second. And this was written by the woman who started She the People. A woman who, every time you look up, she's constantly using that phrase, women of color, women of color, women of color, women of color. And yet when it comes time to get on the Daily Kos, first thing she does, she switches it up. Women, people of color. Well, so much for prioritizing just women of color, huh? Amy Allison has stated who she sees as She the People's priorities. And it's women first, which in numerical terms in the United States means white women. And to show you how obtuse this Allison character is, in her little puff piece, she attacked Joe Biden vociferously when it seemed that Kamala Harris might have a snowflake's chance in hell. But since then, that little delusion has shattered into a trillion irreparable pieces because the new voices of black media crushed it. And Amy Allison hasn't been so eager to trash Biden ever since. And it seems that being dead wrong is what She the People specializes in. Back in December, they put out a poll of their own where they had asked women of color, political organizers, activists, donors, and party leaders who they thought that they should be president. And what a surprise. She the People's results showed that Kamala Harris was favored by 71% of respondents. Keep in mind, this was before Kamala Harris had announced her candidacy. And I'm sure that Kamala saw this poll and thought that she was a shoo-in. Of course, we all know what really happened once she threw her Burger King crown in the ring. It's been a non-stop humiliating siege ever since, with her rising star crashing to the ground multiple times. When someone comes to us talking like this, they've exposed themselves as a white supremacist agent. Black issues have never, not even once, been successfully pushed or promoted by fragmenting ourselves. So when some clown comes along doing the old divide and conquer tactic, which is what this phony flattery to black female voters is about, they're trying to undermine the black agenda. Given our numbers, we can only succeed at pushing and pressing our interests whenever it is all of us together on the same page. If we decide to start fragmenting, then what we get a small group that breaks itself into even smaller groups, and you go from having a hard time getting your interests pushed to having absolutely no chance whatsoever, which plays right into white supremacy's hands. So what allegedly black person would come in the door trying to divide black people? An agent of white supremacy. That's who. The white media made it clear wherever black women lead, the black vote would inevitably follow, or at least that was the narrative. Well, they were right in one regard. Black women have refused to follow Kamala Harris, and the black vote has followed suit. Now, obviously, the reason that She the People is so hot and bothered about Kamala Harris is because there's some sort of personal connection. Well, for starters, the connection is geographical. She the People's based out of San Francisco, though their LinkedIn page says Oakland. In either case, they're from Kamala Harris's stomping grounds, so that's why they've been in the tank for so heavy. Now, when you go to She the People's website and click on their About tab, you get a list of advisors, which is a hodgepodge of self-important harpies, all talking about immigrants and women and girls, but not one syllable about black people. The very first advisor mentioned is a woman named Sayu Bajwani. She's the head of something called New American Leaders. And who is Sayu Bajwani? On her website, she says she's a, quote, democracy activist, TED speaker, and immigrant rights advocate. She also went on to brag that she was New York's first Commissioner of Immigrant Affairs. Commissioner of Immigrant Affairs. So does New York City have any plans of having a Commissioner of Black Affairs? Probably not. And Bajwani goes on to explain what her group, New American Leaders, is. Quote, New American Leaders, the country's only organization dedicated to preparing first and second generation Americans to use their power and potential in elected office. So her entire website's homepage is about absolutely nothing but getting immigrants into the country and then getting them into positions of political power. That's it. She doesn't say one solitary word about black people at all, though whenever she gives her little speeches, she always wants to ride on the historical coattails of foundational black struggle. She just isn't going to actually advocate on our behalf, that's all. But she'll be damned if she allows any of the gains that we've made to not benefit her somehow, whether she should have it or not. She says absolutely nothing about black people, and yet this Amy Allison woman's tripping over her shoelaces to do everything she can for this woman who brags that her entire deal is making sure that first and generation immigrants, people who just showed up yesterday, are going to be in positions of political power when black folks who have been here for 500 years are not in power at all. How in the world do you have an alliance with somebody who lets you know that you are out of sight, out of mind as far as they're concerned? Oh, she's not mentioning this Sayu Bajwani woman. She ain't saying a damn word about black people, though she does make sure to mention that she's Indian. She makes sure to mention that. So small wonder that Kamala Harris is a favorite of this group. Absolutely nothing about reparations from this Sayu Bajwani woman. Nothing about stopping police violence against black people, but she makes sure to mention that she's an immigrant rights activist. See, black people are always trying to make sure we rep everyone else's agenda, but not one of these cross-racial allies is ever promoting things that would benefit us. Her agenda is to totally ignore black people's interests, and Amy Allison is helping her do it. The black fill-in-the-blank alliance that people keep having daydreams of, it only goes one way. One of the other people on She the People's advisory board is Iara Ping. She's the founder and director of the Daily Kos Education Fund. There goes the Daily Kos again. Amy Allison never misses a chance to pimp that organization. As far as funding goes, there's practically nothing on who has given money to She the People. Though I did see that one of the advisors is Jennifer Fernandez Ancona, who is vice president with Women's Donor Network. When you go to their website and look at who runs it, it is nothing, absolutely nothing but white women. So that VP of strategy and member engagement, she's part of the team, but she's not part of the board. So the Women's Donor Network ought to be called the White Women's Donor Network. Keep in mind, these are the people who Amy Allison has on her advisory board. This is who she decided to go to, and she wants these people to guide and direct where her little organization goes. These are the voices that she wants in the room. What she wants are white female power brokers. And she wants immigrant advocates, but nobody, absolutely nobody out there saying what foundational blacks are owed and are supposed to get. So when the white media reports that Kamala Harris is running back to California with her tail between her legs begging for donor money, is this who she's hoping to get it from? Now, it needs to be said that She the People is hardly Amy Allison's first attempt at trying to have some sort of political action committee. In fact, her prior effort was a group called BlackPAC. I shouldn't say was. I think this group might still be around. I'm not really sure. But ever since 2012, Amy Allison's been palling around with this group calling itself BlackPAC, and when you try to see what it is that these guys are actually about, well, according to them, they're basically for biracials and brown folks, and well, that's basically who they're for. But when it comes time to talk about black people, well, they're kind of skimpy on that. When you look at BlackPAC's website, what you find is the story becomes skimpier still when you go to what's supposed to be their background. BlackPAC is building the political power of the multiracial majority in America. What the hell's that even supposed to mean? Even if you take all of the people who will admit to being non-white in America, you still don't get 50%. Little bit premature to be banging the drum on that one, don't you think? They also say that America's politics should evolve. Great, so the practice of leaving black folks out of the political discourse is going to stop thanks to BlackPAC, right? Nope. When you look at the rest of their history story, what they say is that BlackPAC has powered major social movements of our day. And which ones do they list? Because this lets you know what their priorities are. First one they list, defending marriage equality in California. Protecting the Latino vote in Arizona, and passing the groundbreaking online voter registration process. And how they've increased participation of voters of color and younger voters. Now, you notice with all this talk about multiracial majority and America's politics should evolve, diverse leaders, and they're using all of these words, social justice and all the rest of it, voters of color, younger voters, you notice the one group who's missing? Black people. They're the ones who BlackPAC ain't saying a word for. And by the way, BlackPAC, since they've been around for a while, you might wonder if we know that Amy Allison's based out of the same place as Kamala Harris, so surely that stench that we smell must be Kamala Harris close by, and you would be right. Back in 2014, BlackPAC posted a video online that nobody watched called Celebrating 10 Years of BlackPAC, and wouldn't you know it, Kamala Harris, who was then Attorney General and Chief Persecutor of black people in California, she decided that she would give her endorsement of BlackPAC. So there you go. Back in 2014, before Kamala Harris had even announced that she was going for the Senate, BlackPAC was already in the tank for her. These people are not about women of color. They are just more of the white Democrat machine that's supposed to fool black people, using every word except for black, doing everything that they can to talk around our interest, and this is what they're going to do. This is what Amy Allison is about. And she's been doing this a long time. So before She the People, this BlackPAC thing was the other little political hustle that she was running. This was how she was going to finesse a better position for herself within the white left wing's political machine. Now, when you look at how chopped up, watered down, and diluted Amy Allison gets when it comes to the issue of black people, you would be justified in asking, what about her background makes it where she is able to do this? Because we've seen this so many times before, and this is usually a red flag that you're dealing with somebody who happens to see themselves as something different than a foundational black. And when you look at Amy Allison, first thing you find is she's biracial. Her father's a black man and her mother's a white woman, and she's married to a Filipino. So this is a woman who basically, from her parents to the people who she's chosen to make her life partners, this is a woman who has always glommed to circles different than ours. See, this is the problem with allowing white supremacy to define black and then being able to say, we're going to be taking all of these people here, doesn't matter where they come from, what they believe, or what they've done. We're going to go ahead and say that they're part of your group. This is white power diluting the political potency of foundational blacks. Because you got people who in many cases have disdain for us, don't like us. You got 95% of black folks in the country who say we're going in this direction. And you got 5% who are being backed, funded, supported, propped up, pushed, and promoted by white power saying, no, we're going in this direction. And then you got white supremacy saying, well, these people, this 5% over here, they're going to be your spokespeople, and they are completely and thoroughly justified speaking for you. In fact, they're the only ones who are actually valid to speak for you because they're the ones who we allowed into these schools. They're the ones who we allowed into these, who we put in these political positions. We chose them for it. And we're going to say that they're one of you, except that's branding. That's simply very crass, very facile marketing because Kamala Harris wanted to try to be the blackest thing on 2 feet till she realized black folks were not going for the okie doke. Now she wants to be Indian. I suppose that this must have made Amy Allison rather jealous. It's not as if that she could claim to be a white woman. But it lets you know the game that's going on here and how dangerous it is when you allow white supremacy to define what being black is and to define who it is who's going to be speaking for us, because they always choose the people who have the least in common with us and are doing everything that they can to get as far away from us as possible. So this is who runs SheThePeople. This is who created SheThePeople. A woman who has spent her entire life, either she's tried to be some sort of adjutant to white supremacy, or, and Dr. Claude Anderson warned you about this, she's been a consultant for this or that group. That's what a lot of these Negroes do. They claim that they're business people and their business is always consulting. They're never actually making anything. Nothing in the real world is just consulting. And what's their consulting ability? Their consulting ability is, I can sweet talk all of these former slaves into doing what you want. Talk to me because I got the inside track. Why? They'll accept me as one of theirs because white supremacy says that I am. You're not coming up to black folks talking about a black agenda. You're not pushing black folks' interests. You make an organization who is primarily about immigration, which doesn't apply to us. We are not immigrants. We were prisoners brought here. And yet this is the woman who's going to be calling herself corralling the black female vote and trying to herd them in the direction of this or that candidate, but always the Democratic Party. Yeah, that's who and what SheThePeople's about. And as rancid as that is, well, it gets even worse. With the so-called BlackPAC, their white money ties are so egregious and so overwhelming that it's practically a joke. Though no matter where white media outlets talk about them, the very few of them bother to mention that this so-called BlackPAC is funded mostly by white donors. BlackPAC is white-owned, white-run, white-funded from top to bottom. They're a political money laundering operation is basically what they amount to. These are white people who want to trick black folks into turning out to vote. But they want to do it in a way that will benefit these shadowy white political power brokers behind the scenes. You see, these white donors created BlackPAC as a way to push a white agenda, but to pretend that it's black people doing it, when in truth, the only thing black about BlackPAC is the front Negro who's out there, this Adrian Shropshire woman. That's her real name, by the way. Well, this Adrian Shropshire, she's a tool. She basically launders money for white political contributors who want to exceed the federal limits for campaign contributions and use her as a conduit. She has no control over the money that she's given. She has to use it only as her white political donor paymasters order her to. She is a big, fat, ugly tool of white supremacy. There's nothing else she can be. You would expect an empty vessel like her to have a pretty thin resume, and you'd be right. When you look at Shropshire's own bio page, all you see is that she's done so-called community organizing. There you go again, one of those phrases so vague that it could mean anything or absolutely nothing at all. Hell, even the billionaire Koch brothers claim to have done community organizing. That's just how valuable that particular phrase is to black folks. Next, Shropshire blathers on about how she dabbled in police accountability. We all see how effective that was. Economic justice and youth empowerment. Notice what's missing from her list. Black empowerment, or just the word black for that matter. Her bio goes on to say that she advises. That's just another way of saying consult. She advises labor unions, grassroots organizations, and political donors. Yeah, there's more of that consultation crap. She's a professional consultant. At least that's what she claims to be, but even she knows that that lie doesn't fool anyone. Do you see anyone trying to take advice from her? Just like Amy Allison, the only consultation that they do is, I'll be the front Negro who's going to herd these other Negroes in whatever direction it is you, white power, wants. She's a front woman who funnels money for wealthy white political donors. They dictate to her who the money is to go to. She doesn't tell them anything she can't. They dictate to her who the money goes to and how much. You think George Soros would ask her advice as to who he should give $500,000 to? As if this community organizer who has to beg white people for money would have a suggestion worth hearing. By the way, at the bottom of her bio, it gives a link to schedule speaking engagements. Now, if the white people who funnel millions through her don't want to hear what she has to say, what the hell makes her think anyone else would? When you look at BlackPAC's so-called list of donors, which is actually a list of their white political masters, it's the usual list of the usual suspects, like George Soros. You know, as much money as he spends funding black front groups, I'm surprised he's got any cash left. Speaking of which, when you look at the list of contributors to BlackPAC, you see organizations like America Votes at the top of the donor list and the third donor, and all it takes is 5 seconds of looking and you get Politico that gives you a headline showing that George Soros has donated at least $2 million to America Votes, and that America Votes doesn't disclose its donor list. Gee, I wonder why. You see how the game works? George Soros is double and triple dipping when it comes to floating money to these black front groups. He gives money directly and he gives it secondhand. You also see other organizations like Planned Parenthood who gave $10,000 to BlackPAC. Because that's what black folks need. We need more abortion clinics and more abortions so that there can be less black people. And of course, as you see, PowerPAC gave a small little sum, a few $1,000s. So our old pal Amy Allison is in attendance to prop up her fellow black sock puppet for white supremacy, Adrienne Shropshire. You see, the connections between these front Negroes for white supremacy is absolutely incestuous. The ties are incestuous as hell. These guys, there's 0 degrees of separation between them. I want you to see this. These are organizations claiming to be speaking for black people, and the overlap between these clowns is absolutely ridiculous. But the damage that they do, calling themselves speaking for us, it's anything but ridiculous. It's absolutely dangerous. It's lethal. It is genocidal, what you see going on here. This is death by dollars. And in this screenshot, you also get 1 or 2 mentions of the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. That's Mark Zuckerberg and his wife Priscilla Chan's little organization. This is just 2 of the many donations given through them. So when you get blocked by Facebook or put in Facebook jail, or your Facebook page gets taken down, you got Facebook coordinating with the police to turn off any sort of Facebook live camera feed so that you don't see when the police kill an unarmed black mother and her child, pushing white supremacists and trying to suppress the new voices of black media, you can take comfort in knowing that Adrienne Shropshire and the clowns over at BlackPAC, they get money and get paid by that same Mark Zuckerberg. Of course, just because these wealthy white donors are giving millions of dollars to Adrienne Shropshire, that doesn't mean that they're telling her what to do, mind you. Why, Adrienne Shropshire herself said, quote, "They're supporting our agenda, not the other way around." How can she say that when she doesn't even tell us who they are? And that's the beauty of BlackPAC's little scheme that they're running. They got all of this dark money that they're receiving. All of this money coming from organizations and individuals, and we don't even know who the hell most of them are. And she has the nerve to claim, well, these donors, they're supporting our agenda, not the other way around. Yeah, but BlackPAC's agenda is not about black empowerment. It's not about black economic control. It is all about how to make black folks as useful as possible to white political power. You know, when David Duke and the alt-right thugs were on a rampage in Charlottesville, at least David Duke had the decency to be honest. He said that Trump wasn't supporting the alt-right's agenda, they were supporting his. This Adrian Shropshire woman, she doesn't even have the decency or the honesty of a lifelong member of the Klan. You better beware of these groups and these organizations claiming to speak for black people, and they just popped up literally overnight. That's what the Center for Public Integrity reported, that these guys basically just materialized almost out of nowhere. Kind of reminds you of SheThePeople now, doesn't it? What that tells you is these guys are not grassroots at all. They didn't work their way up. They didn't spend years, if not decades, making their connections, making their inroads in the black community, building their support. These guys are not represented by a constituency. They're represented by a bankroll, a white bankroll. It couldn't be more obvious. BlackPAC has white puppet organization written all over it. And there's some things you need to know about Adrian Shropshire. She helped Virginia Governor Ralph Northam to win office. You remember Ralph Northam, don't you? Adrian Shropshire has never said a word against him, nor used BlackPAC's money to fund a contender to Northam, someone who doesn't run around in blackface. Don't you think that that would be a natural decision for this Adrian Shropshire woman? You got a governor who calls himself running around in blackface, then lies about it, then boldly declares, well, I'm not going anywhere. And despite the black outrage in Virginia, there's no outrage from Adrian Shropshire. Have you ever seen her use BlackPAC's money in order to fund some sort of primary opponent? Don't you think she should be using that money to primary some Democrats? But she doesn't. And what does that tell you? It's obvious what this woman is. The white people who are using her as their front Negro to shield their money from campaign donation laws, they dictate to her how she is to spend every single penny. And speaking of people who don't belong in political office, BlackPAC spent almost $1 million trying and failing to help Stacey Abrams become governor of Georgia. And they didn't contribute money to support her campaign in small amounts. They were giving it to her by the boatload. $70,000 here, $227,000 there, $434,000 there. That's $250,000 in a single donation and damn near $500,000 in one donation. This is money that they're putting into trying to back Stacey Abrams. And The Nation reported that BlackPAC spent big money canvassing neighborhoods for Doug Jones in Alabama, who, by the way, little update, he ain't done a damn thing for black people since winning office, and he hasn't even mentioned black people. Well, that was money well spent. The Nation also reported on Adrian Shropshire supporting Justin Fairfax in Virginia, though no mention of what Miss Shropshire demanded that Fairfax do for black folks. In fact, Shropshire barely thought about black people. According to The Nation, quote, polling showed the group that for all voters of color, racial justice issues and the perceptible rise of racism were equal to or more important than the economic issues, Shropshire told me. In fact, they were driving indicators of voter turnout. Now, these are direct quotes from Adrian Shropshire. When she says racial justice and the rise of racism, that means things that scare black people. That's what that's code for. Because where the B1 Brigade is concerned, racial justice and economic issues are one and the same. You cannot have racial justice without economic empowerment for black people. But as Adrienne Shropshire saw it, the polls said to her that when black folks are scared, they don't think about their economic wherewithal. And she was right. Until the new voices of black media weighed in on the issues. Also, from the article, we heard a lot of concern about racial justice after the immediacy of Charlottesville. She, talking about Adrienne Shropshire, added, about Trump, about hate crimes, about voting rights and voter suppression, those issues are huge to black women. You see what she did there? First off, this is your confirmation that when Shropshire talks about racial justice and all of this, it's just a euphemism for fear. This is her bragging that all she's got to do is say racist right-wingers are going to get you Negroes and black folks' knees will start knocking and we'll be so scared that we'll totally forget about tangibles and just vote for whomever we're told. You want to get black folks to forget about tangibles? Just scare them, because you know black folks are terrified of white people, especially the racist white ones. This was the time-honored, time-proven tactic the white power has always used. Whenever it's time to get black folks off of that black empowerment stuff, let's get black folks to stop thinking about the economic issues. Well, we better have some racist white folks out there, preferably on a violent tear. And that tactic had always worked like a charm. See, this is what black people were talking like in the year running up to the 2016 election. Black folks were scared, saying, we know Hillary isn't going to do anything for us, but we can't let Trump get into office. He'll be even worse. You see, only the new voices of the black media told you that Agent Orange wasn't going to do anything that hadn't already been going on. And which one of us was right? You see, Adrienne Shropshire's job is to keep black folks scared, because scared people are so busy running that they don't stand and fight. And there's also something else Shropshire said, that Trump, hate crimes, voting rights, etc. are huge issues to black women. There you have it. Just like with Amy Allison, Shropshire confirms that she's a white supremacist agent of division planted among us in order to divide black men and black women. And no, believe it or not, I haven't really looked at Shropshire's background to find out whether or not she's biracial or the child of immigrants or what have you, because truth be told, with these guys, to an extent, once you go past a certain point, these become distinctions without a difference. If you're not in here waving the flag for what foundational blacks are supposed to get, and yet you claim to be a black person speaking for black issues, as far as I'm concerned, we can lump all of you guys together in the same category. You're not for us. There's not a single issue of interest to black men that is not also of equal interest to black women. I thought the name of Shropshire's little scheme was supposed to be BlackPAC, not Black Women Pack. These are the verbal games that people like Allison and Shropshire like to play. They like to tell you that, we're here about women of color and interest to the black community. And then as soon as they get a chance to speak, it's going to be all about immigrants and LGBT and the environment and everything except for black people. She's showing who she thinks is the most gullible audience for her lies. When she sits here saying black women, that's what she's really saying. I think black women are gullible. They'll fall for anything. All you got to do is give them a pat on the head. Shropshire saw that black men were saying things and that black women were listening, and she was scrambling to try to shore up her support among black women before too many of them began to listen to the message of black empowerment. And now she realizes she was too late. And just in case you think that BlackPAC is some group of small timers, consider this. According to ChamberofCommerceWatch.org, in 2018, BlackPAC was in the top 10 of non-disclosing groups who contributed to congressional elections. Think about that, in the top 10. Now, Considering how plugged in these guys are and how well heeled they are and what kind of big white money donors are behind them, you are fair to ask me, where does BlackPAC stand on the single most important issue facing black folks? Reparations. Where does BlackPAC stand on that issue? The answer? They're dodging the issue altogether. You see, Vox talked to Adrienne Shropshire about reparations, and all she had to say on the issue was, quote, "I think the reparations discussion helps to open up a broader conversation about the fact that centuries of discriminatory policies have prevented mobility among black communities." That's it. She doesn't say that she's in favor of reparations or how much we should get. She just said the same old dodge, the same old diversion, the same old evasion. Let's have a conversation. There's a conversation to be had here. There's a broader conversation. Well, reparations should be a launch pad to a bigger conversation. Yeah, reparations means that we should have entree to talk about something else. If you bring up reparations, first thing I'm going to say is, well, you know what? Reparations leads us to this other issue, which has nothing to do with black folks getting that check. Notice how they never say that immigration reform should lead to a broader conversation. They talk about action to be taken, not conversations to be had later on down the road. And when it comes to LGBTQRSTUV+, they never say, well, this should lead to a broader conversation about other things. No, instead, it's a matter of, well, we need some gay reparations for the Stonewall riots, and we need some other stuff. We need some tangibles. What are you going to be doing? It's only when they get to foundational blacks that everything is supposed to be the starting point of a conversation, not the starting point of action to be taken, just the starting point for a conversation. We never get to the point of actually doing anything. This is meant to condition people that when it comes to black folks, when it comes to foundational blacks, the former slaves, you're not supposed to expect anything to be done. Anytime you bring up something that's of interest to us, well, it's about talk and it's about expressing feelings and venting your frustrations, but it's not about doing anything. You will never see Adrienne Shropshire and that scheme that she's running, putting up billboards or talking about TV ads demanding reparations. She ain't taking out no TV ads for us. She claims that her donors don't tell her what to do, but you never see her going off script. You never see her deciding that she's going to do anything that actually attacks those who have been propping up this unjust system. Nah, she's all about getting money directly from point A to point B and maintaining the status quo. She's not about changing anything. Same thing we've had since H.R. 40 was first introduced. Nobody wants to say that black people should get reparations, only that it should be the starting point of a bigger conversation, and this woman is supposed to be who speaks for black people. You see, CNN will run articles saying that BlackPAC is part of a group of black political organizations, but now you know the truth. Adrienne Shropshire and Amy Allison, they're just front Negroes. BlackPAC and SheThePeople are white political organizations. They just use these two black women as their front people. BlackPAC is a white supremacist front group, and Adrienne Shropshire is a white supremacist agent. She knows what her job is, to pacify and trick black voters into not demanding anything. And in a little bit of unintentional comedy, BuzzFeed wrote a piece last October entitled "Stacey Abrams and Andrew Gillum Are Showing Democrats How to Win Back Young Black Voters." They wrote that just before both of those two lost their respective elections because young black voters refused to vote for them. When it comes to media, when it comes to political commentary, you're not supposed to be able to be wrong over and over and over and over again and still be considered credible. You're damn sure not supposed to be wrong like this and still be in business. They're trying to write stuff that they're hoping is going to persuade people. If people see this headline And if people see us writing up these puff pieces, well, hopefully this will change their minds. Hopefully this will direct their thinking. Young black people online are supposed to be fools for stuff like this. They're supposed to see these lies and think, hey, Abrams and Gillum are reaching out to me. At least that was the idea. But no matter how rosy the headline is, it's not until you read the piece itself that you see the white media understands how rotten the Democrats are in the eyes of young black voters. No matter how brave a front the white media and their black lackeys like Rowley and Joy Reid try to put up, they know that the only reason Obama won was massive turnout from young black people. And the only thing that will get the Democrats back in the White House is massive turnout from young black people. But as this piece admits, young black people are the very ones sick of the Democrats and voting in general. Quote, Democratic groups, including BlackPAC, have found in research and focus groups that young people of color, especially young black Americans, are deeply concerned about the direction of the country, but have become skeptical of politics. These voters, they found, are hungry for success in their own lives, but broadly ignored the Democratic presidential ticket in 2016. There you have it. BlackPAC already did the research. They asked young black voters what they want. And it wasn't that garbage that Adrian Shropshire was talking. BuzzFeed went and accidentally spilled the beans. They used BlackPAC's own so-called research to completely and thoroughly disprove the lie that Shropshire told. Because she was saying that for all voters of color, which of course includes young folks, racial justice issues and the perceptible rise of racism were equal to or more important than the economic issues. And yet that same BlackPAC found in their so-called research that when it comes to young people of color, especially young black Americans, the most important thing is success in their own lives. Not that racial justice nonsense, which is so vague that it means nothing. And no, they're not running scared from the white supremacists, because you got young black folks in the streets of Baltimore, in the streets of Ferguson, and in Charlottesville. They are taking on the white supremacists. So they're not, so all of that, we need some scared Negroes. We better go find those black baby boomers. Their knees are always knocking whenever they think that white power is displeased with them. BlackPAC did the research. They know what it is that young black folks want, but that's not what BlackPAC is serving up. They're not trying to promote what's going to be in the best interest of young black voters. This is about how do you get those young black voters to be of maximum use to white political power. And BuzzFeed goes on to write, instead of just insisting that voting is a sacred civic duty, as Democrats have done before, they're now focusing on persuading these voters, talking about young black voters, that voting is a real, tangible thing that can begin to improve their lives now. Now, you notice that choice of words? You can tell these guys, they crib noted the new voices of black media. Voting as a sacred duty doesn't appeal to young black voters. That's right. So all the too many people died for your right to vote, that crap ain't gonna work. That line won't fly. That garbage won't play. And then they use the word tangible. There it is. Voting is a tangible. This is white supremacy trying to use a Jedi mind trick. Voting, that's not a tangible. Yes, it is. Voting is a tangible. Well, okay, maybe it is. Voting is not a tangible. Voting is where you push for tangibles, but voting itself is not a tangible. This is the white media showing that they're trying to hijack and appropriate our verbiage. They realize that after 2016 and definitely after 2018, the new voices of black media were who the young black folks were listening to. So they're trying to use our words to sell the white media's lies. The only possible connection that the act of voting would have to tangibles is if you've already established before election day that the candidate's going to be bringing you tangibles. If the candidate spells out, here are the tangibles you're going to get, well, in that sense, you can say, okay, voting leads to tangibles, but that's not what BuzzFeed's talking about. They're saying that just voting, period, that's your tangible. You're getting something just because you voted. No, you're not. Voting is a waste of time unless it's already been predetermined and already been specified exactly what it is you're going to get if you go to vote. But BuzzFeed's trying to get you back to the plantation, don't you know? See, we neutralized the multi-million-dollar front groups like BlackPAC. That's what the new Voices of Black Media did. And this has a lot of people scared. They sit around in their little circles and they tell themselves that black people are gullible and silly because for too long, too many of us were. They tell themselves that they still have a total monopoly and that there's no other voices out there. If the white media doesn't say something, then it doesn't exist. And after all, only unreasonable people would dare not to listen to the white media's superior wisdom. Black people need their betters. People like BuzzFeed and Amy Allison and Adrian Shropshire to tell black people what's in their interest, because otherwise black folks would listen to irresponsible people, like Professor Black Truth. And black folks would go pursuing things they don't need, like tangibles, like that check. You don't need a check. Ain't that what Jonathan putting on his Cape Heart said? He said, black folks at heart, what black people really want is an apology. Yeah, you don't need that check. You don't actually need tangibles. What you need is an apology. Forget about that check. I mean, they're being so open with the scam. This is an IQ test, and we're seeing how many black folks are going to fail it. When it comes to tangibles, tangibles are only qualified by three things: something that you own, something you can control, and something you can pass down to the next generation. You can't pass down a damn voting ballot. You can't pass that down to the next generation. You don't own the voting ballot. Showing up to back some Democrat, that ain't going to feed your children. That's not going to put a roof over your head or ensure your future. Now, forcing a politician to allocate resources for you will, but BuzzFeed isn't talking about that. None of these white media mouthpieces are getting in Democrats' faces and demanding that they make specific policy pledges to us. They always keep it vague and unspecific, and the white media pats them on the back for doing so. Talk in circles, talk around the issue, use weasel words, be as unspecific and uncommitted as possible. What was that Democratic memo about Black Lives Matters? Don't make any specific promises. That's the strategy. Whatever you do, if black folks actually press you on it and they actually corner you on it, then what you do is you try to shame them. And so you think I'm going to do something that only benefits black people? No. Like Kamala Harris did. Try to shame black people. How selfish you Negroes are being. You're being so damn selfish. Only ones you're concerned about are you. Well, we gotta be, because ain't nobody else concerned about us. Nobody else is trying to take care of us, so we're going to take care of ourselves. This is the game that they play. This is why Bernie Sanders can claim that he doesn't know what people mean when they say reparations. And when Sonny Hostin told him money, he said, I ain't in favor of that. Rowley and Joy, they know their job is to demonstrate to their white media masters that they can control the black vote and drive us to the polls with all the scare talk. Same as Adrian Shropshire and Amy Allison. They see the new Voices of Black Media have appealed to the young black vote, so now the old, dead black media is saying that young black voters don't matter. But gee, just last October, BuzzFeed was saying that we do, but you got roly-poly saying them young black folks, they don't matter. They don't get it. They don't turn out to vote. The old black folks turn out to vote. They're the ones who turn out to vote. Yes, old black people do turn out to vote, but the problem is they always turn out to vote, and there's not enough of them to put anyone in the White House. Preaching to the choir won't win in 2020 any more than it did in 2016, or 2004, or 2000. White supremacy has placed itself at the apex of the society and crushed black people into the dirt. This is the truth about these so-called black and women of color representatives that you see. The white media gives TV airtime and online web space to them because they are tools of white supremacy. These people are white power's puppets, and they use the media to try to legitimize them. The legitimization process relies on two elements. One, visibility. You have to make them familiar to the public so the public recognizes them and is more likely to trust them. Make them prominent, as Malcolm said. And the second element of legitimization, make sure that you don't challenge them, don't discredit them, don't try to break them down or undermine them. Don't throw any dirt on them. Whenever a Skip Gate comes on TV, the white media never dismisses what he says. They never question it, and he's never called controversial, no matter how much crap he comes out with. They don't do the kind of racist labeling and defamatory slander that they do to black folks who actually speak for our interests. The constant attacks on real black voices, that's meant to condition the public that there must be something wrong with these guys. If someone comes along speaking like these guys, well, there's something wrong with them. They're outside the boundaries of respectable society. They're outside the boundaries of acceptable political and social discourse. This is the white media template that they've used with BlackPAC and especially with SheThePeople. But what they will never do is tell you where these people money for these organizations comes from. Nobody ever does that. NBC, of all people, ran a story about BlackPAC's dark money ties and the fact that these guys are funded almost entirely by white donors. And yet MSNBC never picked it up, and neither did CNN, and neither did Fox News. You want to know why? It's because both the political right and the political left use the same tactics. Whenever you see clowns like Candace Owens, you're seeing a white power puppet who depends on her white right-wing masters for every crumb of her daily bread. And the same thing goes for left-wing puppets like Adrian Shropshire and Amy Wilson. You can't afford to trust people like this. You should not be merely suspicious of them. What they do makes them far worse than merely suspect. These are willing, open, blatant tools of white supremacy. All you have to do is look at where their money comes from. Something that the old, dead black media never dared to do. We're teaching you how to think. We're teaching you how to analyze for yourself so that you can get free. Amy Allison and Adrian Shropshire's money comes straight from the top of white supremacy. The new voices of black media, on the other hand, they get their funding from the grassroots, from the soil, from you. So I'm going to close this out just with a little reminder. It matters who you listen to. The white media is going to be pushing these people heavy going into the Democratic primaries. Expect to see a lot more of SheThePeople. Expect to see the white media putting them on. This is an investment that they're making. Same thing with Adrian Shropshire. But you better keep in mind, this woman who has no problem palling around with a blatant racist like Ralph Northam and has absolutely no scruples when it comes to reparations. As far as she's concerned, reparations, that's a dirty word. Let's move on to something else. And Amy Allison, well, this woman, she's so screwed up and mixed up and her head is so twisted up. This woman's all over the place. She has no idea whether she's coming or going. Now, she can afford to be silly like that. That kind of silliness may not necessarily cost her anything, but it will cost you everything if you follow in her footsteps. You better start asking some serious questions. Every time you see the white media putting on some group claiming that they're black folks' representatives, you know damn well they didn't come from our ranks. And you need to be aware of where that money comes from so you can always have an ever-present reminder that these people are part of white supremacy's bought and paid for phalanx of sock puppet Negroes. And no, it is not okay.